Welcome to our Beer U module on English Brown Ales. English Brown Ales represent a transition in beer from the old world to the modern one. They are a tradition in the British Isles that have made their mark in modern beer cultures around the world. We'd appreciate it if you could grab an English Brown Ale and join us in tasting one while we explore them. Here's a list of them that you can refer to when making your choice, but please feel free to bring along your favorite English Brown Ale on our journey, no matter which one it is. Many English Brown Ales can be tough to come by, but the Northern English versions are fairly commonly available in the United States. The short story on English Brown Ales is this: they're brown, they're ales. Lesson concluded. Well, sort of. The term brown ale can be a little confusing. The name itself does little to suggest that there's much more to these great beers other than color, but the term English Brown Ale has come to mean a pretty specific type, or rather types, of beer. Brown ales are English in origin, and they rely on specialty malts to create both the brown color and the distinctive flavors that they are noted for. But English brown ales are much more than just a color. They are brown, but they have distinct flavors and a long history that make them unique. We'll talk a bit about the history, the color, and the malt that provides it. But let's start with some of the basic characteristics. Brown sounds pretty simple. Lots of beers are brown to some extent, but English brown ales have a wide range of brown colors, and they range anywhere from 12 to 35 on the Standard Reference Method or SRM scale. That covers light brown to dark brown in color. And while some are very clear in appearance, others can be rather opaque and hard to see through, especially if they are unfiltered. Brown ales are generally low to medium in alcohol content, ranging from about 2.8% ABV for some traditional English versions to about 5.4% ABV for some of the bottled and American craft versions of these beers. So they're relatively low to moderate in alcohol content. Hop content, or IBU values, are relatively low to moderate also, with the Northern English version of the brown ale being at the higher end of the English brown ale IBU range. Compared to other traditionally English beers, an English brown ale is generally darker and less hoppy than an English pale ale, less hoppy and darker than an India pale ale, not as dark or strong as a porter, not nearly as dark or strong and less roasty than a stout, and not nearly as strong as a strong ale. Malt is the key ingredient in most beers, and it is prominently featured in both the flavor and the color of English brown ales. Malt is barley that has been treated so it can release all the starches, sugars, enzymes, and proteins that the beer will need. Most of the malt in any beer is called a base malt. Base malts are usually Pilsner malt or pale ale malt, both of which are used in many different beers. Any beer contains 60% to 100% base malt, with the rest being specialty malt. Pale ale and Pilsner malt are the most common types of base malt. Specialty malts, on the other hand, are very specific to each beer style. Specialty malts are used by brewers to enhance flavor and color while creating those characteristics that are unique to each particular beer. English brown ales tend to make use of both caramel malts and chocolate malts for this purpose. Brewers often use other specialty malts in their brown ale recipes, but caramel and chocolate malts are very common in them. Caramel malt, also known as crystal malt, provides a malty sweet flavor that is common to brown ales and much of the color. Caramel malt provides the nutty, caramel, or toffee flavor to the beer. Chocolate malt is used in very small quantities to provide both darker colors and a slight dark chocolate flavor. English brown ales also make use of English hops, most notably the Goldings and Fuggles varieties. Both of these hop varietals are grown in England, with descendants of the same hops being grown in many places around the world. Both Goldings and Fuggles hops are used in English brown ales for both flavor and aroma. Fuggles are known for their earthy flavor, and Goldings hops have a smooth, sweet flavor and provide a great deal of the aroma to English beers. Prized among the Goldings hops are those grown in southeastern England in Kent County. In the early part of the 20th century, almost all beer in England was draft beer. English milds, the early version of the English brown ale, were very common in pubs across the British Isles and were served almost exclusively from casks. World War I had a profound impact on beer production. The demands of the war effort made less barley available to brewers as the government attempted to reduce drunkenness and save raw materials. Less barley meant lower alcohol beers, beers that struggled to stay fresh in the traditional cask world. With their draft beer options in decline, drinkers increasingly turned to sturdier, more stable bottle beers. Brewers followed the shift in consumer demand and started to put more beer into bottles. They added strength to their traditional mild and increased the alcohol level to help it store better in bottles. This led to the development of a new variation of the mild that we know today as the Northern English Brown Ale, a beer that was developed specifically to meet the demand for better bottled beers. As milds are relatively low in alcohol and rather, mild, they are beers that were brewed for drinking over a long period of time in a pub setting. Conversely, the beers known in England as brown ales are relatively strong by United Kingdom pub standards and are more often found in bottles. Of course, there are exceptions to this, as you'll sometimes see a mild in a bottle, and you'll see some brown ales on tap or in a cask. But historically, mild ales are traditional draft beer. Brown ales evolved largely to meet the shifting consumer demand for bottled beer. While it's common to say that the English brown ale evolved from the mild ale, it might also be more proper to say that the brown ale evolved from a similar brewing tradition. They are similar beers that were brewed for different environments, one for the pub cask and one for the bottle. Some English brown ales call themselves nut brown ales. References to the term nut brown ale go back many centuries. And this is likely due to the nut color of many of these beers that is provided by the caramel malts that they often utilize. Of course, nuts come in all sorts of colors, so there's probably a nut brown color for just about every kind of beer. Caramel malts can also provide a nutty flavor in these beers that makes the name even more appropriate, although the term nut brown didn't come about due to the flavor. Some American craft brewers call their brown ales nut browns as well. This is normally a reference to the fact that the beer is more like a traditional English brown ale than it is the stronger, more hop-assertive American brown ale. Sometimes a craft brewer might even use a nut extract in these beers, since the flavors of nuts to the caramel malt are so complementary. The Beer Judge Certification Program, or BJCP, defines 3 different types of English brown ales: the mild, Southern English brown, and Northern English brown. Milds used to be wildly popular in England. The Brewers' Journal estimated that 3/4 of all the beer brewed in England in the late 1930s was a mild. And while milds are still brewed today, they are not nearly as popular as they once were. Several centuries ago, the mild was probably one of 3 beers, or 3 threads, that was blended to create a porter. Milds are typically found on tap in English pubs, though there are some bottled versions. They work well on tap because they are designed to be consumed in large quantities. Their low strength and light hopping makes them ideal for this. And while most milds are brown in color, there are a few milds that are much lighter and amber in color. The Southern English Brown Ale is the darkest and sweetest of the English brown ales. It is sometimes known as the London-style brown ale, as it originated in that city. Sweet caramel flavors are common to these beers, rather than the nutty and drier flavors of the Northern English Brown Ale. Southern English Browns are known for being low in alcohol. The most popular historical example of this beer style, Mann's Brown Ale, measures a mere 2.8% alcohol by volume. These beers started to be bottled in the early part of the 20th century in response to lower quality draft beers being made during and after World War I. The Northern English Brown Ale is the style of beer most recognized today as being an English brown ale. The most popular of these is Newcastle Brown Ale. These beers are generally quite brown in color, but some of them also appear somewhat red. It is also known for its nutty character in both color and flavor. And when someone calls a beer a nut brown, it is quite likely the Northern English Brown Ale they're speaking of. The Northern English Brown Ale was developed specifically in response to the decline in quality traditional draft beers and milds during and after World War I. The American Brown Ale is distinctly different from the English Brown Ale. While the malts and color might be very similar in many cases, the American browns are usually much more hop-forward and more strongly flavored than their English counterparts. For this reason, we normally consider them separately. American brown ales are part of the American ales family. Despite the fact that we consider the American brown ale separately, it is worth considering here because it is easily perceived as a bigger, hoppier version of the Northern English brown ale. When serving an English brown ale, a Nonic pint glass is likely the best option. It's a traditional English glass, and the bulb helps to retain the head of the beer. English brown ales are low to medium in intensity, and strong foods will overwhelm them, but they pair well with nuts, nutty flavored foods, and grains. Breads and nutty cheeses are perfect companions for them, and they also work well with grilled and roasted meats. With dessert, they are terrific with chocolate, caramel, and toffee flavors.
Congratulations, you've finished the module. Hopefully you have a few minutes to take the optional quiz that is coming up. Like I said, it's optional, but if you are taking a Beer U curriculum and need to get credit for this module, you'll have to take the quiz and get at least 70% of the answers correct in order to show this module is complete. Good luck.